Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review. Today I'm reviewing a film that I'd been meaning to watch for a long time and finally watched it almost a week ago, and I'm meaning to sit down and review it, but, scheduling things. Anyway, it is the 1979 thriller film directed by Walter Hill based on the 1965 novel of the same name, The Warriors. Warriors, come out to play. Yeah, that film. Anyway, it has a 7.7 on IMDb, which is a pretty reasonable score, especially with how the scores on that one seem to be with older films, but usually films like most people usually love have high scores. Mixed ones usually seem to have lower scores for some reason. Anyway, this is not an IMDb, right? It has an 89 with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes and a 91 with the critics, no consensus. So this is a film that most people seem to universally like. In addition to being directed by Walter Hill, it stars Michael Beck, James Remar, Dorsey Wright, Brian Tyler, David Harris, Tom McCurdick, Thomas G. Waits, who is uncredited, Terry Mikos, among others. And the film takes place in New York City. Now, originally the rights to the novel were acquired by American International Pictures, but no film resulted from there. Why? I don't know, but I'm going to guess since they never got around to it and the rights lapsed. They were then obtained by producer Lawrence Gordon, who then commissioned David Shaber to write a script. And Gordon sent the script to Walter Hill along with a copy of the novel, and Hill recalls that he said, "Larry, I'd love to do this, but nobody will let us do this. It's going to be too extreme and too weird." And you look at the final film, you could say it is extreme in parts, it is weird in parts. But that helped. That's one of the film's strengths if you watch it, if you take it in context with the whole film. But at the same time, you can understand why earlier they're like, this is going to be one of those films that is going to take a little bit to get made, but if you can do it right, it will work. And of course it works. And a little bit after this, Gordon and Hill were going to make a Western, but the finance for that film went flat. So they took the Warriors to Paramount Pictures, who were doing youth films at the time, and they managed to get the film financed. And Hill mentions he was drawn to the film because it had an extreme narrative, and it was with simplicity, and it was stripped down, the script quality at least, and as written. And you can see originally it's a semi-realistic take on street gangs, but since the director is a fan of comic book movies, he put that in there, so you do get a little bit of the realistic vibe of how street gangs actually operate, but then there's the over-the-top cartooniness of the comic book put in there, and they kind of off-balance each other well. And of course it adds a little bit of a dark humor element if you think about it, especially with the more outlandish gangs like the baseball Furies. Anyway, the plot of the film is that it takes place in New York, like I mentioned, and it's one night where all the gangs in the city are being called to this one location under a truce. And there they are talked to by Cyrus, who's kind of like a messiah figure, or at least he's trying to be one, and he proposes to all the gangs that they assemble and make one uber gang with a permanent truce to take over the city. And of course, this is where one of the more famous lines from the movie is said, "Can you dig it? Can you dig it?" And in the middle of his speech, he gets murdered, and it is blamed on our title gang, the Warriors, by the guy who did it. He's like, "It's not them, it's the Warriors, they did it!" And of course, the leader is beaten up, and it's kind of hinted that he's killed or at least very badly injured. The rest of the Warriors managed to get away, and now they have to get away from where they were at, which was Van Cortlandt Park, all the way back to Coney Island. Now, I have never personally been in New York City. The closest I've been was across the river in Newark. So I don't know how the boroughs are all lined up, but I'm going to guess it takes a while to get from that park to Coney Island, especially if you're going by subway. And that's the point of the film. They have to get home, not only because of the distance, but there's also the fact that they got other gangs all around them who are going after them because of them thinking that they killed Cyrus. At first, they don't know if that's the reason. They think that maybe the truce is now broken because of his death, and they're just going through enemy turf. And of course, at points they got to deal with cops. And that's basically just the film, is them getting home. And as they get home, a couple of times they get separated. A couple people disappear. One gets killed. One gets arrested. And eventually they do make it home, but then they got to deal with an end thing, which I'm not going to spoil the ending of the film, but I felt it fit the film, even though part of it is like, did those guys just come out of nowhere? Did no one notice that they just came? Or were they too distracted by the whole knife to a gunfight thing? Anyway, Walter Hill's direction in the film is pretty good. Now, I don't really have a lot of other stuff to compare it with. I'm going to take a look. This was his third film, and I have to say for a third film he does a pretty good job with it. 48 Hours, and another 48 Hours in Red Heat I haven't seen yet. I've seen parts of Geronimo and American Legend. Last Man Standing I've seen parts of, which I thought he did good. Supernova I haven't watched. Undisputed I haven't watched. The only one on here I really watched all the way through is Bullet to the Head, which those films really are very different, but not only because the different decades and all that, but an older filmmaker. But if I remember right, Bullet to the Head does kind of also speak a little bit of minor studio interference. I mean, with the whole casting thing. But that's another day, another rewatch video. But that's the only thing I really have to compare it to. But one of these days I'll get down and watch the other ones. And also Southern Comfort. That's one I've heard that might be good to watch. But anyway, for this film I thought his direction was pretty good, especially since there was only a $4 million budget. Which, watch this, you can definitely tell it is, but since it's a very simple story, you don't really need a lot of money. And just using the right environment and the right settings, the right lighting, it works. And the film made almost $23 million, so it made a pretty good amount of change for that budget. The acting in the film, the actors do good for what their characters are. I mean, there's not a lot of depth to a lot of the characters. I mean, there is some nice moments between one of the warriors and a female character that decides to go with him. And there's a nice little romance thing that develops over the course of the film. It's not really a forced one. It comes off as natural, and it's reluctant at points. But I felt it worked. And of course, there's some humor from Remar's character of Ajax. And he has one of the best lines in the film. I'm going to shove that bat up your ass and turn you into a popsicle. There's a lot of other quotable lines in there, but a lot of them are escaping my head. I mean, it's been a week, so a lot of the lines are going to escape. There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on throughout the course of the film. And one thing I did really like is that they have the DJ basically telling all the gangs where the warriors are and what they're doing, and I thought that was an interesting little twist. We, the audience, we know exactly what she means by what she's saying, but it makes me wonder what non-gang member characters in the world of the film are thinking, like, what are they doing talking about? Who are the baseball Furies? I don't know if that's a team, but people in the area where they live are probably like, ooh, the Furies, they got their asses kicked. And there's some interesting trivia for this film. According to the script, Fox was originally supposed to be the love interest of Mercy, but the two actors had no chemistry, so the Mercy romance was transferred to Swan. And Waits was fired 8 weeks into principal photography anyway, for apparently being too difficult and arguing with Walter Hill, which is why his characters are moved from the film the way he does, and he's uncredited. And of course, nowadays Hill feels bad about the rough times he had with Waits, and I guess he wishes that they could have, compromised during it. Makes me wonder what originally was going to happen to the character of Fox. But anyway, I think it kind of works story-wise anyway, because, Remar's character gets arrested later in the film for what? I'm not going to spoil it, but you can kind of say he deserves it. If you've seen the film, you know what I mean. And one of them getting killed, I think, works, especially if you also add onto it that their leader gets killed at the beginning. And one take, Michael Beck, Swan, swung a bat into Deborah's face in the scene where he throws the bat at the cops. And she was rushed to the hospital at 3 a.m. for stitches, and she still has a scar. At one point in the film, Swan was to be abducted by a homosexual and sadomasochistic gang who had Doberman pinchers, and he was scripted to escape and lead the warriors home. And apparently Ronald Reagan was a fan of the film, and he even called Michael Beck to tell him that he had screened it at Camp David. That's a weird little film to screen at Camp David. The interesting thing about the baseball Fairies, apparently they were created both due to Walter Hill's love of baseball and the glam rock band Kiss, which you can kind of tell that a little bit in the way that their makeup is done. During the subway scene where Mercy is running with Fox's double, apparently she fell and broke her wrist because the actor didn't let go of her hand, and this is why she's wearing a jacket later on. And apparently film trucks were protected by a real gang called the Mongrels for $500 a day, so that's where some of the money went. And apparently crew members were also sent death threats because local gangs weren't cast. And thousands of dollars worth of equipment were damaged when one gang tore through the set during a lunch break. I could just imagine, seeing the tension like that on the set. This is interesting. Apparently Walter Hill originally wanted the Warriors to be an all-black gang, but producers disagreed. He also wanted a subtitle at the beginning to read some time in the future, but Paramount thought that sounded too much like Star Wars. I could see that a little bit, but if it's sometime in the future, you can make it a little timeless, but I guess it works better that it doesn't. Robert De Niro was asked to play the character of Cowboy, but he passed on it. That makes me wonder how this film would be with De Niro in it. But, that's just an interesting what if. Oh, this is interesting. Sol Urich wrote the original book as a rebuttal to the romanticized view of street gangs presented in West Side Story based on his experience as a New York City welfare department worker. I can see his point there, but I guess you also, when you look at West Side Story, if you know that it's a modern day retelling of Romeo and Juliet, you can kind of see why it is romanticized there a little bit. Because I guess street gangs, the only other thing in modern day you could really bring it up, modernize Romeo and Juliet as would be the Mafia, which kind of the 90s movie kind of does that, but without fully modernizing it. And I'd say it kind of works, it's an interesting rebuttal if you think about it. Now this is funny. The crew once got urinated upon from a tower block due to the noise they were creating in the night. My freaking dogs reminds me of something that happened during Predator 2 filming with them throwing trash on them. But anyway, what else is there to say about the film? It is a great action thriller. When there actually is fighting scenes, they're shot competently. Like I said, the actors do a good job. You could tell that some of them do have chemistry together, like they are friends. Some of them not so much, but that adds a little bit to the film. The music, when it's used, is used pretty well. The opening title sequence is also edited very well. The film as a whole is edited very well. And like I mentioned, Walter Hill's direction is very well done for this film. My rating for it is a 4 out of 5, and it does come with my high recommendation.